Welcome to part 4 of my scrap heap challenge. Please remember that this build series is not about finding better components or the optimal components. It's about reusing stuff I already have. Some of the parts I'm using are highly questionable, like this heated bed. It's 300 by 324 volts. The front of this bed should be on the center line between the 12mm rods. This base plate came off my old printer and it was painted in red, but of course I had to make it green or light green. Not what I would call a professional paint job, but it looked okay. My old printer had these wonderful yellow springs and red wheels. They had to go. My heated bed wasn't even close to the Voron specifications, so I had to make some brackets to get this in the right position. The green knob is not for adjusting anything, it's just to fix this permanently. And this is what it looks like on the printer. I'm using 3 T-nuts to attach the base plate to the center extrusion. I needed some cable chains for this build, but I didn't have any. I found a good model on printables and there's a link in the description. And this is what it looks like fitted onto the printer. Inside this you'll find wires for a heated bed, thermistor and the set endstop. For the set endstop and the cable routing I had to make this strange part going from the endstop and to the cable chain. The original design of this endstop is kind of interesting. You're using a pulley, taking off the flange on the top of it and then push it down into the plastic part like this. You then install a micro switch without an arm. It looks like this. You then insert a M5 shaft into this pulley and it presses down on the micro switch. To prevent this shaft from falling out, you should grind off a piece of it and use a set screw to limit the travel of this shaft. The end stop is attached to the printer and attached to the cable chain. The tensioning system on my printer is actually quite good. Using this thumb wheel is very convenient. The rest of the gantry on my printer is pretty much stock, except for the fact that I'm using MGN 12s and not 9s as in the original design. There must be 50 videos showing how to build the trident, so I'm not going to show that. I'm testing out how the gantry moves, and on this image you can see there's actually a pretty serious mistake, and if you built a trident or a 2.4 you can maybe spot it. I'm now ready to square the gantry, and that means pulling this extrusion all the way back to the A and B drives and making sure that they are touching the A and B drives, and then I can attach the screws firmly and keep this extrusion in place. That wasn't too difficult. I didn't have to do any changes to get this square. You'll also find a couple of bolts below this extrusion. The final touch on the gantry is this, I call it the useless pulley. It's just there to cover up the dual shaft on the stepper motor. I'm getting ready for the belts and I still haven't discovered the error I made. Maybe you have by now. When you begin working on the belts, you figure out the exact length of one belt and then you make one absolutely identical in length. In that way you can ensure that the tension is the same when you have completed the belt path, because it's equally length for both sides. And this clamping system is very good and easy to use. This is my first Core XY build, but the belt path on this one isn't that difficult to figure out and the documentation is excellent. Smaller hands would have been better for this, but I will have to settle with what I've got. It's a bit tricky to get the belt path through the front idler, but by removing the tension bolt it becomes much easier. This belt is now coming close to my mistake, and the mistake is that this carriage for the x-axis is the wrong type. It should have been MGN 12H and not MGN 12C as I had on the x-axis. I didn't have a complete rail MGN 12H in the correct length, but I did have a carriage that fit the other one, which was kind of a miracle. But this is it, it's now ready for the tool head. I'm going to use the standard probe for this build. I know it's not the best choice, but that's the one I've got now. I would like to get something like an eddy for this printer, but that will have to be at the later stage. This might bring back some memories for some people. I think I need one for this printer. I used to have a lot of them, but I've thrown them away. I have no silicone brush in my scrap heap, but I'm actually going to buy this one. Removing filament from nozzles with pliers is a thing of the past. Getting a tool board like this would be nice, but it's beyond the scope of this build, and it's also recalled for the time being. When it comes to Hotends, I have this original E3D V6, and it's the 24 volt version, so that will work on the printer. I also have these spare Bambolab Hotends, just missing thermistor and cartridge. That sure looks like a tempting option, and I will have a closer look at that in part 5 of this series. Please subscribe, and I hope to see you back in part 5. Bye for now.